Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to review the real estate market analysis for Morgan Hill for February of 2009. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I'm a licensed real estate broker in the state of California. I'm also a member of the National Association of Realtors and a certified ePro. And if you would like to get in contact with me, or if you'd like to see any of my other video presentations on the markets in my area, or listen to any of my podcasts, or read any of the articles that I've written relating to real estate, you can find those at www.soldbyrobert.com. If you'd like to get in touch via email, please feel free to do so at robert@soldbyrobert.com. If you'd like to call me directly, please feel free to dial 408-852-0525. If you'd prefer to chat online, use AOL Instant Messenger, Google Talk, or Yahoo IM with the screen name The Rebel Broker. And if you're using Skype, feel free to use the screen name Rebel Broker. And of course, referrals are always appreciated. If you or anyone you know is interested in real estate in the Silicon Valley area, please feel free to get in contact with me. Or if you're interested in real estate anywhere in the United States, just get in touch with me and I will help you track down the perfect agent for what you are looking for. Now let's go ahead and jump right into the statistics for February of 2009 for Morgan Hill. The first thing we're going to go ahead and look at are the supply and demand numbers, and we'll start first with the inventory numbers. Interesting news here. It's good news. It's also the first time we've seen these kinds of trends where the inventory numbers are actually starting to go down a bit. Inventory is actually down 14.15%. That is 44 fewer homes on the market in Morgan Hill in February of 2009 than were in the market in February of 2008. That's fantastic news. It's still exceptionally high, but at least I can now stop saying we have set yet another record going back 10 years for inventory numbers. That trend has now finally stopped. We could say 2008, last year, we've kissed that year goodbye, and we are now actually in a better position as far as inventory is concerned than we were last year. Now, as I mentioned, inventory is actually down 14.15%. That's a reduction of 44 homes on the market. The overall inventory is down 44 from the same time last year. That leaves us with a grand total of 267 homes currently on the market in Morgan Hill. So that's great news for folks who are trying to get their homes sold. Now, what's also interesting about this inventory number is it's still particularly high. So while it's good news for sellers, it's still good news for buyers, and we'll see how some of those numbers are playing out as we move forward with this. But it's also still good news for buyers. It hasn't completely changed. It's still obviously very lopsided towards buyers. But we'll go ahead and take a look at the rest of these numbers and see how it pans out for everybody. Now, the next thing we're going to look at are the new listings numbers. Now, this is the number of homes that are added to the inventory. So these are folks who've decided to list their homes. Now, as you can see, that number has also dropped in 2009 when compared to the same time last year. It's actually down 36.17%. That's 34 fewer homes listed in the month of February of 2009 than were listed in the month of February of 2008. Again, that's good news, and that gave us a total of 60 homes that were listed in Morgan Hill. Anything that contributes to lower inventory numbers is a good thing, and obviously if we list fewer homes than in past years, we're going to see that contribute to a reduction in the overall inventory. Now, what does that tell us? Now, we're into February now. So now remember, this is all just going back just the month of February. So none of the seasonal things are at play here. The good news is that we're not seeing a profound increase for the month of February given previous months. There's not a lot of panic selling. I think a lot of the market has settled down as far as just deciding what they're going to do. There's not a lot of folks that are sort of knee-jerking one way or the other based on whatever the most recent statistics are telling them. Now let's go ahead and jump on board with the sold homes. We can take a look at that and see where we stand. We can see here that we actually are doing fairly well on sold homes. Number of homes sold is actually up 50% from February of 2008. So in February of 2008, we only sold 9 homes. In February of 2009, we sold 18 homes. Now, that's great news. So basically a doubling of the amount of homes that sold. So overall, this is really great news. We're nowhere to the point where we have a balanced market yet. Things are starting to nudge that direction. Still very much a buyer's market, and we'll see as we move forward here with other data that's obviously still the case. Now, as I usually like to do with these numbers, we take the total amount of inventory we have and divide it by the total number of homes sold to give us an idea of how many months worth of inventory we have on hand. And if we were to freeze the numbers where they are right now, stick with the number of inventory we have, stick with the number of homes sold, it would take us 14.8 months to sell off all of the homes. So that's a little bit more than a year. It's 2 months over a year to get all of these homes sold if we sold at the current rate we're going. The county was at 8.67 months, so we're still performing poor compared to the county in general. But you know, the numbers are heading a good direction. So while that's not a horribly encouraging thing, at least we're seeing some of these specific statistics going in a direction that we want to see. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these same numbers, just looking back over previous months. And again, we'll start with the inventory numbers. As you can see, the trend, excuse me, the trend has actually been slightly up. Excuse me again. Inventory is actually up 6.37% from January of 2009. That's an increase of 16 homes put onto the market. Again, we're looking at this. These are affected by seasonal influences. Remember, this is just a month-to-month look at what the numbers have been. And if you look back to November, to November, December of last year, you can see we saw basically the same kind of trend. We saw things going from December, January, February. We saw pretty steady increases in the inventory. Now, that's normal because folks are, as soon as we get into the new year, that's when folks start listing their homes, putting them on the market in preparation for what's perceived as the hot summer months for getting things sold. And you can see that last year we saw numbers ramping up all the way up until we hit April. We didn't really see declines until May, June, July timeframe, and those were relatively subtle decreases until we headed into winter. Now, does this tell us anything about what we might expect this year? Yeah, we're not seeing anything that's out of line with what we saw last year. So a lot of what we saw in 2007 and in 2008, I think is good to inform us on where we're going to be going. So I would say that we're going to see inventory probably continue to increase in the coming months. Now, notice that the increase was much more dramatic last year than this year. We're seeing a much more gradual increase between, say, January and February, December and January, when compared to the same time last year. I think we saw a lot of properties going on the market last year because a lot of folks were frankly, panicking a little bit relating to the market. We're not seeing quite as much of that this year, so it's a much more subtle increase. What I would guess is we'll continue to see subtle increases. Maybe we might see a little bit more of a dramatic increase in a month as we get closer to summer, but I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see a very gradual increase. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the number of homes listed. We can see that's actually down from last month. It's down 16.67%. That's 12 fewer homes that were listed in the month than in January of 2009. Again, that's actually good news. If we look at the same numbers for last year, we can see that between January and February, the number actually went up. So more people put their homes on the market in February than they did in January of 2008. And that, I think, again, that's fairly normal given the psychology of what was going on in 2008. It's interesting that fewer people are putting those homes on the market. What that tells me in some ways, and a lot of this is going to be affected by the proportion of homes that are conventional sales versus foreclosure sales. But I don't think we're seeing a lot of folks who have if they have the ability to choose if they're going to sell their home. I think those folks are just not doing it. They're seeing the market is down. They're seeing they're not going to be able to get as much as they want for the home. So if they have the discretion to not put their property on the market, they're not doing it. And frankly, I think that's relatively smart. I think the properties that we're seeing going on the market right now, a lot of them are foreclosures and short sales, and those are institutional. So those really have nothing to do with psychology. Those just have to do with the fact that unfortunately a home has been foreclosed on, or that someone has no choice but to go into a short sale situation. Now, if we take a look at sales, we can actually see perfectly flat performance. We sold the same number of homes in February as we did in January. Now, if we're looking at last year's performance between January and February, we actually saw an increase between January and February of last year. But last year we had an extremely low January. So I think that I don't think it's bad news that we aren't seeing a big boost in sales between January and February as we did last year, because we're just in general at higher numbers. And I think that's good. The numbers we're seeing now are actually more normal numbers. In fact, they're boosted just a tiny bit by the fact that I think folks are coming out and taking advantage of some of these great deals on short sales and foreclosures. Now, on that subject, let's go ahead and take a look at what portion of our market is being made up. What's making up our market right now? What percentage conventional? What percentage is short sales and foreclosures? Well, as you can see from this fancy schmancy pie chart, 56% of the homes that sold in February of 2009 in Morgan Hill were 56% of them were foreclosures. 17% of the homes that sold were short sales, and 28% of them were conventional. So if we add those are two numbers up here. We've got 73% of the homes that sold in Morgan Hill were short sales or foreclosures. That compares to 68% at the county level, so a little bit higher percentage of ours were short sales and foreclosures than overall in the county. And Morgan Hill tends to get the short end of the stick when we're comparing ourselves to the county in general. But 28% were conventional, so we're still seeing conventional sales out there. And I know I've mentioned this before. I'm encouraging buyers to not do searches just for short sale and foreclosure homes. I know that currently the transactions I have a deal in escrow. I have another deal where we're talking about making an offer on them. Now, both of those are conventional transactions where negotiation has been the key to getting a great deal. Now, with short sales and foreclosures, anybody who's jumped into the short sale situation has probably come back out of it with bruises and no house to show for it. The short sale process right now stinks. It's horrible. If you want to read more about that, read my article. I've written about it on my website. But the short sale situation is brutal right now, not so much because it should be or because it just inherently is, but because of the way that these properties are being handled by real estate agents and banks is atrocious and horrible. You have to be very patient. It can take forever to even make a deal happen. Now, and there's not a lot of room for negotiation once the actual price has been established on a short sale. On a foreclosure, there's a little bit more wiggle room than there is on a short sale, but still a foreclosure isn't going to have the kind of wiggle room you might get from a conventional sale. So while at first blush, some conventional properties might seem out of your price range, you will often find for a lot of these properties that these prices can be negotiated down far further than you're seeing with short sales and foreclosures. So you can end up paying about what you'd pay for a short sale or foreclosure property, but you're getting a property that doesn't have any of the inherent problems that come with foreclosures and short sales, such as deferred maintenance, holes in the wall, have everything having been turned off for months and months at a time. Let me just strongly suggest anyone out there who's interested in buying, make sure you're hooked up with a real estate agent who really values the importance of negotiation and has a proven track record of really negotiating those prices down. Now let's go ahead and I'm sorry to digress onto that, but I'm seeing so many folks really missing out on some great conventional opportunities out there. I think it's worth mentioning. Now let's go ahead and jump on to home prices. Obviously, this is another thing that folks really care about. Whether you're a buyer or a seller, this has got to be at the top of your list of things that you're concerned with. Now, as you can see, we've still seen pretty much a big drop since 2007 in home prices in Morgan Hill. The average home price was down 30.25% between February of 2008 and February of 2009. That's a dollar value of $238,717. Which has got to be a shock for a lot of folks out there. Now, remember, these are average home prices for the homes that have sold. This isn't representative of the homes that are currently on the market. And also remember that short sales and foreclosures are dominating our market. And short sales and foreclosures tend to be down at that lower end, tend to be below 500. The ones that are selling tend to be below the $550,000 mark. In fact, most homes that come in under $500,000 are selling relatively quickly, at least for the county in general. We still have some pockets of areas where even that price is too high for some homes, but just keep that in mind. Now, the median price was $555,000. So you can see it's very on par. The volume of homes that are selling, half the homes that sold were in actuality above that price, and about half of them were below that price. So our average price is really a good indicator of where the market stands right now as far as homes that have sold. The median change was median drop 24.69%. That's a dollar change of $182,000. Now, like I like to go through and sort of give you the spread of what's going on with prices with some specific examples. Now, in Morgan Hill, the home that sold for the highest amount of money was on 2415 Magnolia Court. That home sold for $730,000, and it was originally listed for $849,000. Now, that was a conventionally sold home. That was not a short sale or a foreclosure. And look at how much negotiating got that home down. Now, it was Originally listed, as I said, for $849, sold for $730, so that price came down quite a bit. It was on the market for 162 days, so quite a while. Now, the next home is really kind of interesting. This is the lowest priced home that sold in Morgan Hill in February of 2009, and that property was on 16637 Lone Hill Drive, and it sold for $270,000, but it was originally listed for $324,900. And now what's interesting about this particular home is I want to give you a little bit more detail. If you go talk to anyone who crunches the numbers on Morgan Hill or the county or anywhere else, they would tell you that this home sold in 74 days, and that would be incorrect. If you go and you look at the specifics, this home was taken off of the market for about 30 days, probably with the specific intent of losing the connection to the old data. If you go back and look at it, you can see this home was actually originally listed to be sold in 5/20/2008. That's May of 2008. So if we sort of just ballpark how many days that thing was actually on the market, it actually comes out to more like 270 days that it took for that home to get sold. So it was on the market for an exceptionally long period of time. Now, the home sold in June of 2006 for $547,000. So that's basically half price. It's really quite amazing. About half the original sales price just in 2006. So that's pretty astounding. Now, the price per square foot in Morgan Hill in February of 2009 was $272.18. Last month's, January of 2009, was $289.72 per square foot. So we actually saw a general drop in that number, but nothing so substantial that it really tells me a big trend is coming or going. Now let's go ahead and take a look at home prices just over past months, see if this gives us any sort of an inkling on where things might be going. Now what I've done here is I've gone ahead and run an average number and a bar here, so you can sort of see just in general terms the line indicates the general trend of the overall numbers over the period of time we're looking at going back to September of 2007. You can see it's obviously trending down. The numbers make that pretty clear. There's been a bit of a fluctuation in that number over the months, but remember we have a relatively small sample of homes that sell each month in Morgan Hill, so it's easy to see those numbers get skewed by a particularly high or low priced home. Now, again, the average home price was $550,366. The percentage price change between January and February was 26.63%. It was a drop of 26.63% for a dollar amount of $199,727. Now, because we had sales that were quite a bit up from last year, what we're really seeing, I think, in this case is several homes selling on the market I would normally tell you that what I was thinking is that the homes had been on the market for a while. But what we're going to see in a moment is that the days on the market, the days to sell of these homes, isn't elevated as we would expect it to be. But even that isn't the real story. But we'll get to that as soon as we're on the days to sell slide here, because there's actually an interesting story there as well. Now, so this average drop, more indicative of, I think, of a real number. Numbers in January, I think, were a little artificially high because of some properties that sold then. But the overall trend, the downward trend, and the average home price, I think, is a pretty good representation of just the direction that things have gone. So much of what's going to happen with you specifically, if you're someone looking to sell your property, it's going to depend on where your home is, that type of thing. So if you're taking this and thinking, oh well, whatever I paid for it, given the time period, is down 30% or 40%, whatever these numbers indicate. That's not necessarily the truth. So much of it is into the micro markets, smaller neighborhoods, and frankly, Morgan Hill is no exception to that rule. There are parts of Morgan Hill where we're seeing average prices being very much higher than the average for the city. So if you've got any questions, feel free to give me a call, and I'll be happy to do a market analysis on your specific property, wherever it might be in Silicon Valley. All right, now, here's the median price. As we can see, the median is right on par. Now, see, what's interesting is the median is relatively is the same as it was last month. So what you're seeing is that there were far more. The majority of the homes that sold in January were below the average price, and in February, the majority of homes, there was no real majority. We saw half of the homes were above average price, half were below average price. that just basically tells you that there were one or two homes that were far above the average price that sold to bring, or far above the median that gave it that higher average price. And that's why I always like to include the median here, so you can sort of get an idea of perhaps how skewed the average number is being by one home that happened to be a much higher priced home. All right, now let's go ahead and jump into the days to sell, because there's some interesting data this month for the days to sell numbers. If we go ahead and just look at all of these, now this might be somewhat encouraging, and I know in past months when we've talked about these numbers, I've had to artificially compensate for numbers and bring this down a little bit, because a lot of times there'd be one or two homes that had been on the market for 500, 600, 400 days, and that was skewing everything. Well, this case, we have the opposite that's true. This month, we actually had a few homes in Morgan Hill that sold that had been relisted. Now, if you want to know what relisting is, go ahead and read the article I wrote about it on my website at www.soldbyrobert.com. I don't like the practice because it tends to screw up the data, and the bottom line is that all these little communities that report their data and that the county reports to, all the pundits up there use the data I'm sharing with you to determine what they think's happening with the market, and often it is very skewed. And Morgan Hill is not unique in this respect. This happens all over the state and all over the country. And so if they get bad data, people make bad decisions and bad assumptions based on these numbers. Well, what I'm telling you is I've compensated for some of this, not in this number. This is the number as it would be reported. But if we compensated for the fact that some folks relisted a few homes that sold this month, for instance, the one I mentioned where at the end of the month it reported 72 days on the market, and in reality it's more like 270 days on the market. Well, you can see where that would skew it. So the real average number here is actually more like 120 days, 110 days. So the escalation that you see stopping between 2008 and 2009, we'd actually see it, I think, a little higher if we compensate for the fact that some of these homes were relisted that sold, and we'd draw the conclusion that it is taking a little bit longer in February of 2009 to get a home sold than it took in February of 2008. And honestly, I think that's the correct conclusion. I don't think it's actually taking less time to get a home sold. I think it's taking about the same as 2008, if not maybe a week or two more than that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these same numbers in previous months. Now, as you can see, we're actually trending still up. The trend line there sort of gives you an idea, but it's actually relatively flat when averaged out over the past year. We've had a few months where it was artificially high. Now, and you would normally expect to see this number jump a bit when we start to head into a period where a larger number of homes sell, as homes that have been on the market for an extremely long time finally get sold. So seeing a big jump in March isn't a huge surprise. You'll usually see that at the beginning of summer and then right at the end. Like in August, for instance, as a lot of folks end up making an offer in July, those all close in August, and then you see that reflected as some higher numbers, some higher days on market numbers for August of 2008, for example. Now, does this tell us anything about where we're going on days on market or how long it's going to take to get homes sold? Well, I think there's really two stories to be told here. I think that there's the short sale and foreclosure story to tell, and I think there's the conventional sales home number to be told here. Short sales and foreclosures that are priced correctly, and there are plenty of them out there that aren't, are tending to sell more quickly. Conventional homes are taking a little bit longer to sell because of two reasons. One, an artificially high number of buyers are focusing their attention on short sales and foreclosures based on the theory that that's where the real deals are to be had. I don't agree with that, but I know a lot of buyers out there aren't even bothering to get listings sent to them for review unless they're short sales and foreclosures. Again, I'll say it again. I think that's a short-sighted, self-defeating way of shopping for a house, and I would strongly suggest that folks look at all properties that are available, not just short sales and foreclosures. So what's the real number? If you're someone out there who's not getting involved in a short sale or foreclosure, what's the real number for you to get your home sold? Well, again, as I've said before, so much of it is going to depend on the person you've decided to market your home, the realtor you've selected. If they don't have a proven track record of getting homes sold in a relatively quick amount of time, that if they don't have a strong marketing campaign, and if they're not working with you to really make your home show well at the curb and once they're inside the house, then something is wrong. If your agent hasn't really worked with you on getting your home put together to get your home sold, You need to either talk to them about that and fix that situation, or get yourself a new agent who is going to take that seriously and help you work through getting your property marketed and put together correctly. All right. Let's go ahead and call this one done for the month. That is Morgan Hill for February of 2009. I really do appreciate you all taking the time to listen to what I have to say on these subjects, and I appreciate those of you who get in contact with me with feedback and suggestions and ideas, or just to chat about real estate. It's always a pleasure. Please use any of the methods currently on the screen to get in contact with me if you'd like to do so, and I look forward to talking to you all next time. Thank you.